Welcome to my notes on quadrilaterals. So today I'm going to introduce quadrilaterals with a story. So we have the quadrilateral family tree, and as I read the story, I want you to look at the diagram here and kind of follow along. So once upon a time in the land of Pelagonia, there lived a shape named Rod R. Lateral. Everyone called him Big Daddy. There was really nothing special about him except that he had four straight sides. He had two offspring, Graham and Trap. So yellow is Graham and Trap is the green. Graham was an orderly sort, perhaps even more so than his father. Everything had to be lined up just so, although at times his walk was a bit slanted, as you can see here. His brother Trap was a different shape altogether. Being a free spirit, sometimes his sides were at wacky angles. Trap enjoyed his crazy life and embraced his uniqueness. So this is the green one. In time, Graham settled down and had two children himself, Rex and Rom. Rex inherited his father's tendencies toward orderliness. He too was always lined up just so, but he walked straight and tall, like a right angle. Rom, like his father, tended to walk with a slant, but was perfectly proportioned. All four of his sides were exactly the same length. Rex and Rom grew out to be mad scientists. They decided to produce a clone that had characteristics from both of them. After working for a very long time, they created a new shape, the purple shape named Squire. Squire was a delightful being and had acquired the best qualities of Rex and Rom. Not only did he walk straight and tall in a right angle fashion, he was also perfectly proportioned. All his sides measured the same. The whole family joined the gym to get in shape, and they lived happily ever after. So you can see that Graham is a descendant of Rod R. Lateral. And then we have, so his parents, and then we have our Rod R. Lateral, Big Daddy, would be the grandfather of Rex and Rom. And then Squire would be considered a descendant of Rex and Rom. So a square is all of these shapes. A square is a rectangle and a rhombus and a parallelogram and a quadrilateral, but a square is not a trapezoid. Okay, so let's complete the notes. A quadrilateral is any four-sided polygon that does not have a more specific name. Quadrilaterals are the broadest category and contain all other four-sided figures. Specific names are given to quadrilaterals that can be classified by sides and angles. So now we're going to look at a parallelogram, and I'm going to go over some terms that you need to know as far as for the markings. So what is a parallelogram? It is a quadrilateral that has four sides. Opposite sides are parallel and congruent. So I'm going to show you the parallel marking. So the arrows, and I'm going to do two arrows. So this side is parallel to this side because they both have two arrows. And this side is parallel to this side, and they both have a single arrow. Now, to show congruency as far as sides, I'm going to use hatch or hash marks. So here, I'm going to use a single hatch mark or hash mark, and one here. These are congruent. Opposite sides are congruent. And also here, I'm going to use a double to show that this side is congruent to this side. Now I had to use a double because it's not, the smaller side is not as long as this side, okay? Now we have opposite angles are congruent, and now we're going to draw those in. So I'm going to use a curve. One single curve there and one single curve there. Those are congruent. And then I'm going to use two curves here to show that that one is congruent to that one. So make sure you are drawing in these markings. These are very important. And then lastly, the diagonals bisect each other. And bisect means to divide into two equal parts. So let's look here, and we're going to draw in the bisecting lines. So you can use a ruler to help make these straight. Now it's important to note that these are not congruent, because if you look here, this is a little bit higher than this side, and this side is a little bit higher than this side. So look, this one right here is longer than this one. So they bisect each other, but they are not congruent to each other. The bisecting lines are not congruent to each other. Okay, let's turn to page 2. What is a rectangle? So it's a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. And it's also a parallelogram because opposite sides are parallel and congruent. So let's draw those in. So we're going to say parallel. So that side is parallel to this side, and this side is parallel to this side. And they're also, this side is congruent to this side, so I'm going to use double hash marks or hatch marks, and I'm going to use a single hatch mark here to show that those two are congruent. Okay, the diagonals bisect each other and opposite angles are congruent. So the diagonals are congruent. They're exactly the same length. We'll draw those in just a second. And also, a rectangle has 4 right angles, which measure 90 degrees. So let's draw the right angles in first. Okay, just draw a square in the corner of the box. And then I'm going to show you the bisecting lines, so please draw these in. And they are exactly the same length. Okay, remember the bisecting lines for parallelogram were not, but these are congruent, meaning they're the same exact length. So let's move on to rhombus. So what is a rhombus? A rhombus is a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. It's also a parallelogram because opposite sides are parallel and congruent. Diagonals bisect each other, and opposite angles are congruent. But here's what's a little bit different. All sides are congruent, meaning they're all equal. So to show that all sides are equal, I'm going to use a single hash or hatch mark. And we're going to draw in parallel. This side is parallel to this side. And this side, I'm going to use double arrows. It's parallel to this side. And we also said opposite angles are congruent, so I can say that this is congruent to that by using a single curve. And this double curve is congruent to that. Now the diagonals intersect at blank angles, so let me draw it in and let's see if we can figure this out together. So we're going to draw them in, and look in the center here. All those angles are the same. Do you know what they are? They are right angles. So let's write right angles here, and let's draw in the right angles. So we're going to draw a square in the middle because these are all right angles. Okay? So notice they form 4 right angles where they bisect, where they intersect, sorry. Okay, So let's look at our next one, a square. So a rhombus was a quadrilateral and a parallelogram. Let's see what a square is. So a square is a quadrilateral. It has 4 sides. It's a parallelogram. Opposite sides are parallel and congruent. The diagonals bisect each other. Opposite angles are congruent. It's also a rhombus because all sides are congruent. So let's put the hash marks in here, or hatch. The diagonals intersect at right angles. We'll draw that in later. It has 4 right angles, so let's put that in there. And the diagonals are congruent. So a square is a rhombus with 4 right angles. I forgot to draw the parallel, so let's say this side is parallel to this side because opposite sides are parallel. And this side, double arrow, is parallel to this side. And now let's draw our bisecting line in here. And they are congruent and they form right angles. So if I ever asked you which 2 shapes have diagonals that bisect at right angles, you would tell me square and rhombus. So a square, notice, is a rectangle because it has 4 right angles. It's a rhombus because all sides are congruent and the diagonals intersect at right angles. And it's a parallelogram because it has 2 sets of parallel sides. Opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, so it has all the properties. Except for, turn the page, it's not a trapezoid. Okay, so let's find out what a trapezoid is. So it's a quadrilateral with 4 sides, but it has exactly 1 pair of parallel sides. The parallel sides of a trapezoid are called bases. The non-parallel sides of a trapezoid are called legs. Now, not always, but it could have 1 pair of opposite sides congruent. So look down here and make these. So 1 pair of opposite sides congruent. A trapezoid with congruent non-parallel sides is called an isosceles trapezoid. And so we can label this. We can put the arrows. Those are parallel. But these are not parallel, so I'm not going to put any arrows here. But this is congruent to this. And this is congruent to this. So double curves here. Now, a trapezoid may have 0 or 2 right angles, and we can draw them in right here. I'm kind of giving this away. A trapezoid with 2 90-degree angles is called a right angle trapezoid. Okay, so we have the quadrilateral flow chart to kind of conclude this, and it looks very similar to the story. I just have trapezoid on this side versus on the original chart it was on this side. So we call the group of shapes that we just learned quadrilaterals. And the shape that was kind of off by himself was the trapezoid. He didn't have any offspring. But remember, the quadrilateral had a trapezoid and a parallelogram. And then if you remember, the parallelogram had a rectangle and a rhombus. And then they made a clone of their best qualities and came up with a square. Now, it's important to note a square can be considered a rhombus, a rectangle, and a parallelogram, and a quadrilateral. But a rectangle, okay, and you don't have to draw this, but a rectangle right here, this is not a square because they don't have all equal sides. And it's not a rhombus because they don't have 4 equal sides. So they don't have right angles, make it and equal sides. Remember, to be a square, it has to have 4 equal sides and 4 right angles. Okay? And to be a rhombus, it has to have 4 equal sides. They can be slanted. Okay? But it needs to have 4 equal sides. All right. So that concludes our notes on quadrilaterals. I hope you have a great day.